All right. Hey, everyone. Nice to see you all. Let me just quickly share the slide and we will start. So, welcome all of you to yet another great session from our Beacon series. And this one is going to be called From Needs to Visual Models, the human way, the AI way, and the smart way. And I just saw that we have this still June '07 here, which is obviously not correct. I wish it was June. However, it's December, which is also nice. But June, I think, is warmer and nicer. All right, guys, let's see if we have our chat working. So if anyone can just put something in the chat, like for example, where you joining us from, that would be nice to know. And make sure you put this to everyone, not just the panelists. Okay, we have Lviv from Sergei. We have Bogota, Colombia. Wow. Nice, nice. We have people from Kharkiv, Kiev, Lviv, a lot of people from Kiev. Nice. Krakow, Sofia. That's fantastic. More coming. We have Dnipro, we have Lviv. All right, we have Zoom, which is perfect. Nice, nice. Rivne, Sofia, Dnipro, Sofia, and classified location. Got you, Alexei. Okay, that's also fair enough. Nice, nice. So I see the chat is working, and I think we can keep that communication in the chat whenever we want to tell something to our speaker or comment on something. And we have Poznan also. All right, thank you. Great. We have people joining from lots of different places. That's fantastic. So let me just quickly, before I introduce our speaker, just give a short information since that webinar is backed up by SoftServe. And for those of you who might not know SoftServe, just a few words about us. It's a tech company specializing in consultancy services, software development. We're offering a wide range of services, including expertise in big data, the Internet of Things, cloud computing, DevOps, e-commerce, computer security, experience design, healthcare, and various other things. And of course, artificial intelligence, which is not on that slide, but I think it's like goes without saying. And especially as today's topic is around a lot around AI, I think. So before I jump to the next slide, just want to say that we have a quite well-established business analysis office. I think like a lot of people joining here are business analysts from SoftServe, and like the business analysis office was established in 2012, and we have around 400 business analysts all over the globe. Before we jump to the introduction of the speaker, I have a great announcement, very exciting news for 2026. It's about arts and crafts of business analysis. We are bringing back our famous course, and to be honest, that's completely new course. But the thing is, this it has the same idea. That's a course which is designed for experienced business analysts. So it's not for the beginners. It's for someone who already have some experience, have grown, and is ready to step into next level. Feels ready to get their hands on some new techniques, new approaches, and a lot of different stuff. So we prepared a totally new course for you. And which is great about this course, it's delivered by very experienced business analysts, all of them from SoftServe. And what is also great about this course, it has a lot of practical workshops, and we have some online session, a pre-recorded session, so it's kind of a hybrid format, which allows you to take some of the sessions in your own pace, but also participate in live workshops. So very cool course. I'm really proud of that product, and I hope you will enjoy it once you get registered. So there is a QR code. I think if we have an ability also to share a link in the chat somewhere would be great. So this course starts on the 23rd of February. You have still some time to think about it, to evaluate, and to, read the curriculum, ask some questions. There's a QR code which leads to this page, and yeah, go there, check it out, and register. We're starting 23rd of February. All right, now let's introduce our speaker. And today we have Georgy Naidenov, who is a senior business analyst at SoftServe from Bulgaria. He is a certified business analyst. He has two high top level certification, CBOP and TOGAF Enterprise Architecture, which is great, one of my favorites. He's also very passionate about AI. I know this for sure since we communicate a lot on that topic. And he's a co-author of 5 AR articles, created the most extensive AI ML resource library online. That's true, absolutely. And yeah, got into AI back in early 2022. He's also specializes in different domains as a business analyst, energy analytics, healthcare, cybersecurity, insurance clients, engineering analytics, and logistics. And as he claims, makes the worst dad jokes known to man. Maybe you can share some with us today, Georgi. And audiophile, turntable enthusiast, and mosh pit enjoyer. Okay, that's great. All right, I see Marta have shared the link in the chat. Super. Thank you so much. And Georgi, I think I can pass the mic to you and sharing the stage. It's yours. Take it away.
Thanks a lot, Kirill. And quick note, I'm technically from Bulgaria, but I'm currently in Poland, in Wrocław. So that's a bit of a change. And as a fun fact, maybe not a dad joke, but I'm currently searching for different vinyls to get for my turntable. So I hope I get some. That
Would be
being
great.
said, thanks for the introduction and for the whole thing. And thanks everyone for joining this, be it in the Zoom meeting, YouTube, or wherever you're watching, maybe even pre-recorded. I'll be sharing my screen in just a moment, and you should be able to see it.
Yeah, we can.
And I even decided to fix the date because, so
Nah,
sometimes you forget what date it is, and you end up in June or July. That being said, today we're going to talk about several different things. One of them is a quick caveat, a disclaimer on AI generated content. I like to begin with that because in most cases, I would say that um, AI content is still very immature, but I'll get into it in just a bit. We're going to discuss then how we define visual models because there are a lot of different definitions, and I would like to hear yours as well. We'll talk about gathering and scoping requirements, how diagramming is actually being made, how AI-assisted diagramming can help you out, and then we're going to conclude with traditional versus AI-assisted diagramming. And as final, we're going to talk about resources because I love to have on my trainings with something to share with. Now, a quick disclaimer from my side on AI-generated content. As I mentioned, AI generated in 2025 actually means large language model generated or large vision model generated or by AI agents. And the thing is, most of the outputs generated by AI still require human review just because they might be missing something. It might be because they're hallucinating because of a context window. It might be because you used unreliable sources or they searched up those. Even when you have some evaluations, monitoring, observability placed in case hallucinations might still occur. And that's why it's a industry practice right now that each product should have human in the loop. And that's what I would advise you to use even when you're generating diagrams. So please do not copy and paste a diagram and call it a day. That's not the premise of this workshop. I'm not gonna tell you how to generate diagrams using an automated process for you to sit down. That's not the purpose. So with that being out of the way, let's get into the gist of the session. And if you have any questions throughout the way, please do let them in the chat or in the Q&A session. I would be more than happy to answer them ad hoc if I can. Now, I have a question for you guys before I give my definition to this. What do you consider a visual model? Can you type down when you hear that word, what does that mean to you? Is there a specific definition? I'll give you a minute or two, and then I'll go on to explain the way that I define it. Diagram. Anyone else? BPMN. Good. Schematic presentation of anything like process or concept. Okay. I really like this definition because it's really encapsulating. And this is actually something similar to the definitions we're going to look to in just a bit. Anything that structures text visually or even avoids text. I like that as well. Now, when we talk about visual models, we're going to use the industry definitions for what that means. For example, IIBA loves to define visual models as a descriptive and visual way to convey information to a specific audience. So what that means is a visual model is not just limited to a diagram or to a specific standard. It's more so an expression, a visual way to communicate some form of requirement, some kind of information to a specific audience. Because, for example, some of the diagrams that I would make would be process flows if I wanted to communicate to business stakeholders, but the same diagrams would be sequence diagrams for more technical stakeholders that have no idea what the process flow would look like. But there's also other definitions. The BPM book of body of knowledge defines it as a visual representation of business processes, enabling analysis and communication. Now, while I do think that's a relatively good definition, I feel like it doesn't capture the full story because it's not always business processes. PMI defines it as a way to visually capture a complete system from a specific perspective, which I consider to be a better definition than the former. But the last one I want to specify and to communicate to you is the one by the requirements engineering group, which define it as to model requirements visually and thus present complex relationships in an easier to understand way, which to me is the closest definition to what visual models should look like, because they could be a form of presentation, an infographic, a diagram, or something else. That being the case, I would honestly relate and resonate myself more so to the fourth definition rather than anything else. If you do disagree with them, please put that in the chat. Now, with definitions out of the way and the theoretical part out of the way, we're going to explore the traditional diagramming process and how we actually get to it. And my question to you will be, after I present the slide, do you have anything that you think I missed or that was not mentioned, but is actually present in your day-to-day work when you're doing diagrams? So the way that I go about diagramming myself and the way that I want to explore in this session is by going through a requirements engineering process. So before we even get to creating diagrams, we need to be honest with ourselves and understand, okay, do I actually understand what I'm about to diagram? Do I understand what's happening? And am I aware enough of what's supposed to be communicated in order for me to visually display it? Well, to answer that question, I diagrammed this process specifically to communicate that. So we would start off by eliciting requirements, and requirements may come from different types of sources, pardon me. It could be, for example, if you're working at a project, it could be by going through the current state architecture, the current state of the whole thing, the architecture, the application, and so on. You could also be reviewing metrics because those can provide you with insights on a process that might be lacking for you to visually communicate it. It could be user interviews or patient or even clinician interviews, depending on what sector you're in. Those can provide you insights on what kind of things are needed right now to be captured in the form of use cases. It may also be things such as organizational constraints, because each of us operates in some form of constraint, in a sense. It might be that you have the perfect process, you might have the absolute perfect way to communicate it, but the person in front of you might not understand it. They may not like what you're going to present purely for political reasons within an organization. So that might be an organizational constraint for you. You might also have specific domain constraints that come from expectations that you get from banking, for example. If you work in the banking industry, you would have specific processes that the end clients are used to that you shouldn't overstep, that you shouldn't really change because they might lead to the application not being used, for example. And then there are also the regulatory constraints where, for example, imagine you're working for a healthcare application. In that case, you might be looking at something like HIPAA or high trust in the US, or you could be looking at GDPR or some other form of regulation that might be reducing the scope, reducing the process that you have to capture. Now, after you take all of the requirement sources and understand what they are, your job is to synthesize and decompose them into actual requirements. And from there, to categorize what those requirements are going to look like. And those could be must-haves and wish list requirements. So we could consider must-haves the things that are definitely required in order for a given process to work. And wish list ones would be ones that we could consider as if there is time, we are going to do them. In a similar fashion, we're going to focus on the must-have requirements here. Now, after that's done, we're going to complete the requirements analysis process. So my question is, does anyone think that something was missed in here? Because there's one thing that I left out on purpose, just to see if someone is actually listening. What do you think was missed out? It might be very, very obvious. If not, I'm going to give you a hint actually. Apart from user interviews, how else do you get requirements? Validation is a good point. Yes, needs and stakeholders. I didn't speak of stakeholders. I only talked about end users. So it might be your stakeholders, it might be your developers, the team that you're working with, but you need to validate it with them. You need to get information from them as well. Otherwise, the whole requirements process might actually be limited to your own interpretation of things. Now, with that being the case, we're going to talk about how diagramming is made after you have the requirements. So after you have the requirements, you would focus on defining what scope and what kind of boundaries and the diagram type that you're going to focus on when presenting specific, when trying to visually communicate information. Now, I listed some of the diagram types that you can also find in Babok, as well as in other bodies of knowledge. But for example, you might want to capture it as a form of an activity diagram or a sequence diagram or a process flow. It really depends on who the stakeholder is and what kind of information you want to communicate and on what kind of level you want to communicate that information. Because for example, imagine that you're trying to create a data flow diagram and you just want the highest level possible so people get the idea and that you know that you're on the right track. That might be useful when you're looking at the at level 0, but for actual development purposes and for your team, it might be good to lower it down to level 1, 2, or 3, and just really get a bit down to emphasize on the specific requirements in the specific niche parts of it. Now, after the diagramming process is done, after you know what diagram you want to get, it's about choosing what kind of standard you want to follow. Sometimes you don't really get to choose. Maybe your project uses BPMN and that's a must-have. Maybe it uses UML, or maybe it uses something very specific to your organization. In that case, it would be way easier to choose the standard, but this is something you should consider before even starting to visualize anything. Now, after you have the standard selected, your job is to understand what the target audience is going to be, whether the diagram, the visual model, is going to be for your business stakeholders, for your end users, for the architects that you're working with closely to define the processes, or maybe it's for the software engineers because you're doing delivery in a project and you want them to actually connect the dots, and it isn't just um, a user story that's written as a wall of text. Or maybe it's the quality control engineers who want to ask you several times, what did you consider this specific edge case? So you can actually prove them that you did. After you have selected the audience for which the visual diagram is going to look like, the next step is to actually draft diagrams for review. So that also depends on the level of detail you want to go with the specific diagram, whether it's on the discovery phase, the delivery phase, or even the definition phase, which is not outlined in here. And from there on, it's up to you to decide the granularity of the process, whether it's going to be a bird's eye view and it's very high level, and it could be just 9 or 10 components, or it's a granular diagram that could encompass an entire service map. And it's very, very big to the point where you get lost in it. And whenever there's a change in the project and in the requirements, you might actually have to spend hours just to fix it. Now, this is the traditional diagramming process, or at least the one that I've followed up until now. But what happens when you want to go for the AI-assisted one? Well, to answer that question, we have this section over here. But before we jump into that, I have a small thing to share with you. So as Kirilo mentioned at the beginning of the session, we are having an arts and crafts of business analysis course that's coming up in February, and you can sign up for it. To give you more details about what it encompasses, it gets into the nuts and bolts of how a practicing BA can actually leverage the experience and the skills they already have, and even use additional skills, additional techniques that they might have not used or have only read about to actually practice them through trainers that have the experience to back up the whole thing. So you'll be going through and learning about how to define process modeling with BPMN. You'll be able to create entity relationships diagrams. You'll look at things like how do you act as a BA in pre-sales and many, many other things. And the biggest thing is, apart from the traditional process that we just discussed, there is also modules, well, not a specific module, but every single part of the whole thing integrates AI into it. So you would have the traditional way, but you would also get a way to actually use AI in order to go through every single piece of it. And the best thing, it's remote, it's online. The sessions are also recorded. And the biggest caveat over here is that it's IABA endorsed. So you do get the 44 professional development hours that will be used for the training for any IABA certification you might want to use and to actually sit, or to renew your specific certification if, for example, you have the CCBA or CPAP. Are these homeworks? Good question. Um, so to that one, could I possibly get some assistance from either Kirill or Marta? But I do believe that there are.
There are no homeworks.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
Okay, I was
You
about to
know
fool
why?
you.
And you know why? Because what we've learned that like more experienced BAs, they hate homeworks and they never do it. So that's why we just ruled it out.
Okay, thanks for that. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the AI piece. So a lot of the internet is actually talking about prompt engineering, about how you can use the perfect prompt to make diagrams, to make text, to make whatever it is. Prompting applications like Lovable, like Gemini, Canvas, and so on. But the thing is, prompt engineering has been dead for pretty much 1 or 2 years at this point, or even more. The thing is that prompt engineering by itself is relatively bad. And the reason is that it mostly depends on having a system prompt. So the initial instructions that the model receives before even talking to you, and your prompt, which is the user message. And that is interpreted via a transformer model who provides you with a specific answer. And how context engineering solves this, and how we're going to actually tackle this when we're generating diagrams in a bit, is by adding additional context. And what that additional context is the following. For example, I've been creating diagrams using specific AI tools. In this case, we're going to talk about Claude and ChatGPT. And since I've done that, the models do have memory of me actually doing diagrams. So they know the standards that I'm using. They know what my expectations are and what I like to use and what kind of standards I uphold. And that's configured in the memory. That's actually sent out alongside my message in order to have a full answer. And the thing is, models are mostly reasoning models at this point. So that means that they really break down the task into manageable step-by-step knowledge, which is included into the comprehensive instructions bits over here. And apart from that, they also have the message history that you got. And they also use different types of tooling, such as web search, such as specific tooling in order to visualize the diagrams that we are going to talk about. And once that's done, everything is fit within the context window over here. And all that information is sent out to the LLM so they can provide you with a good answer, a better answer than they would 2 years ago. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about how AI-assisted diagramming could possibly look like. And this is just one example process. I don't really think that it's the only one. I also think there are better ways to do it. This is just one way for me and one way that has worked for me during the past months. But if I have to be honest with you, the Claude-based prompting has been more helpful to me in the last few months uh, than the GPT one was some years ago. That being said, the way that we're going to look at in this specific session is we would go through the process of defining defining requirements through AI, basing based on very limited amount of information. So this is about actually visualizing and diagramming processes when you lack the information, when you don't have access to stakeholders, and when you're provided with very limited high-level information about what the process should look like, to the point where you're not sure how to do it yourself, and you're mostly going to use your actual experience in order to visualize them. So this is more so a step for you to not start from a blank canvas. And the way that you're going to do it is you're going to throw a specific prompt, which is already defined, and one that you're going to receive after this session ends. You're going to send it out through ChatGPT. You're going to get an AI generated use case, which at this point, it's your time to review it. We talked about human in the loop because models do hallucinate even if they have all the context about you. And you can get into 4 different options. You could either rewrite the prompt because maybe you missed something, you forgot a specific word, or you mismatched some of the information. You could add additional context that you forgot. And this honestly happens to me quite a lot. I think I have the perfect prompt or I have the perfect situation, and then I forgot, oh, I totally forgot about not including a specific type of information in here. Or you could also have follow-up prompts because you know that the model might not give you the best first time answer. And finally, you can also manually edit the specific use case that comes out of it, because sometimes not using AI is actually faster than using AI and vice versa. It's all about getting to a positive outcome rather than just saying, I'm using AI for this process. Now, after the quality check has been completed and you're satisfied, the use cases part is complete. At that point, you're going to take all that information, you're going to throw it into Claude, you're going to input the specific requirements, you're going to get another type of, how do I put it? Another type of prompt. And from there on, the model is going to generate artifacts for you. Then you're going to go through the exact same process. It could be to rewrite the prompt, to add context, to follow up prompts, or to manually edit it. If not, and always good, you'll be able to export the end visual model and export it into Mermaid Code or into another format. If, for example, you really love Visio instead of Draw.io like I do, you can import it into that system and then manually edit it yourself. Now, I did speak about the process in several ways. So I want to ask, does anyone have any question up until now? Because the next step is actually demonstrating how all this works. Because this was in purpose made to be very short as a form of presentation, just so we can get into the nuts and bolts of it. What tools support Mermaid input? I'm not exactly 1000% sure about this. I know that Draw.io does, and that has been enough for me for now, just because most of the diagrams that I make are based on Draw.io, and Mermaid does import them. If you're talking about what kind of AI models can produce Mermaid code, that's pretty much all of it. It could be ChatGPT, it could be Gemini, it could be Claude. All of them do produce good enough Mermaid code where you can input it. Do we have any other questions? Yes. Yes, Draw.io supports it. Okay. If there are no other questions, we're going to jump into the demonstration piece. And to do that, stop sharing my screen for just a moment. And we're going to share the screen for AI models. So for that, I do request just a moment of your patience. Please do excuse me. I just need one more minute. Okay, so we're back on the on a specific word that I have some of the prompts that I want to show. And after that, we're actually going to discuss what kind of requirements you have so we can actually model them together. Because I don't want this to feel staged. And the whole point of this session is to really show you how you can actually use visual models in your work. Now, This is the system prompt that I use for all of the chats I have with different models, be it ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, whatever. And the thing is, I just paste it as a system instruction over here and forget about it. From there on, my prompts are pretty much made ad hoc because most of the prompts that I have done throughout the years are pretty much not as good anymore, precisely because language models have evolved throughout the years. Even during the past year, there have been over over 9 or 10 model releases for the top AI players, and there have been more than 600 to 700 different models on Hugging Face and on the NVIDIA store. So catching up to the specific prompt format that you should execute is very, very hard. And frankly speaking, is not the best use of your time. So at this point, it's good to really dedicate your time to a system-based prompt instead. Now, before I jump into the first part of the section, there's also one other question. What is your opinion on creating diagrams using PlantUML? Have you tested this tool? Frankly speaking, no. Mainly because I've used quite a limited set of AI models in order to do my diagrams, just because I know they work and they have been doing work for me. So I've tried Draw.io for personal use. For AI, it's been ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and at some points I've also used the Visio one. But otherwise, I do not really use any specific AI tooling outside of generic AI interfaces for generating diagrams. And the reason is that I like to use the enterprise license in order to avoid the situation where the information is leaked out and there could be regulatory or just fines issues you would normally get into. Now, in order to get into the first process that we're going to talk about, here is a GPT-based prompt, and I'm going to go over it, paste it, and then we're going to talk about requirements. So the prompt itself is structured in a specific way. It talks about anchoring the specific AI model that we have in mind, and having the objective that the idea is to convert user provided requirements and to map them out into a use case format that's akin to Babok. And that's why, apart from just general structure instructions that we have in here, there is also an outline template of what should be included, just so the model does not use, for example, an outdated version of Babok. So it doesn't use V2 that's before 2015. Now, with that being the case, I'm going to provide specific requirements from the ones that I have pre-prepared, but we can of course explore some requirements that you may have. So we're going to look at an energy analytics platform, which has a battery management and custom valuation feature, a configurable renewable input, and tailored pricing forecasts and market signals. Now, this is on a very high level, and really drafting processes for it is really hard without actually talking to stakeholders. So the purpose of this is to define high-level use cases at a baseline level. For this, we actually may use the thinking model. That being the case, it decided that it does not want to use the thinking model because it didn't figure out that it's complex. It didn't think it's complex. And we get a good high-level use case model for a process like battery asset registration and monitoring. And it defined the specific system, the system name, the relationships, preconditions, and so on. Now, that being the case, let's try to get this specific use case. Well, first of all, in a real life situation, I wouldn't really be copy pasting it into Claude. In here, I would normally be providing it with specific requirements based on the context I've gotten from a specific pre-sale or a specific call that I've had with the context of a project that I'm involved in or a specific initiative that I'm in. And since this is just a generic process, I would say that it's okay to really go about and just copy and paste this one. Now, at this point, we're going to have this as requirements, and we're going to jump into a second platform. We're going to use this Claude-based prompt. We're going to paste it. And ask for the model to work on it. Now, the thing is, usually diagrams don't really work out the first time that you try to use it with AI models. And the reason, for example, why I'm using Claude for this and not ChatGPT, considering that it has the latest and benchmark greatest model out there, is that in my experience, after testing out different tools, it seems that Claude has, in a sense, better style diagrams and better ways to actually produce them in a way that's also exportable outside of its own system, because OpenAI artifacts usually lock you in inside of the platform itself to the point where you cannot really download them at a good state for which you can actually continue the work onwards. Now, as you can see, after providing the specific prompt and after providing the requirements we got based on the use case, what happened was the model started breaking down the process and started reasoning what the use case is about. It figured that it's about battery asset registration, that it involves a user and a platform, that it has a sequence, and it has a flow. Now, based on it, it figured out that using these diagrams might be good. And after analyzing it and after calling specific Claude skills, it decided to go with a sequence diagram to best communicate this entire process. And the way that it worked is after it decided what the diagram should be, it decided to create a UML-based compliant sequence diagram. Now, whether that's going to come out good or not really depends on the model itself. And at some points, it might break. Like the actual visualization might actually break to the point where some arrows are missing, or the process is not fully defined. That usually happens with Claude models because they're not limited by context usually, but are mostly limited by the time spent on the thinking process. In my experience, when you leave a model to work for more than 10 minutes, it just decides to spaz out and even delete the entire conversation. Now, for the sake of time, we're also going to run the same situation in Gemini. And for this one, it's my personal account. It's definitely not a corporate-based one. But I just wanted to give it as an example for you, just so you understand how you can use it if, for example, you have a Google Enterprise subscription in your respective company and you wanted to figure out, can I do diagrams using Google's processes, using Google's models? Now, while it's doing that, let's see what Claude managed to come up with. As you can see, it's decided to create the process itself. It's defined the use case in one HTML-based page. And on a high level, it's good, but if you've ever done a sequence diagram, you would know that it's not actually usable. For example, the register battery asset within provider's metadata looks awful when it's out of box. And this happens throughout the entire process. It doesn't even follow the best practices. So at this point, what we could potentially do is to ask it to review the entire process and the sequence diagram and rebuild it from scratch in React. Now, while it does that, because that usually happens, that actually happens a lot to me when I'm creating diagrams using AI, to the point where I sometimes drop them and just create the diagram by myself. And sometimes, if it's for non-work related situation, I would use Gemini because it does things a tad bit better. For example, it defined a simple sequence process well enough to the point where it is starting to communicate with a battery and renewable asset platform. It has the entire registration process in place. It has the monitoring and control process, and it defined it in two separate waves. It also managed to gather all the requirements in place as well. Now, while it does that, we're also going to look at something else. We're going to add more information to actually extend this type of diagram as well. So what I would normally have in a sequence diagram is also the system actors that you would usually have. So at this point, I might ask something like, I provided it with just generic processes and generic information, such as having role-based access as a specific operations user, that it needs to actually authenticate via a Microsoft service. And it decided to start updating the diagram from scratch in order to visualize it properly. Now, while that's happening, as you can see, when Claude was thinking about how to do all this thing, it went into a spiral of actually thinking about how the diagram should be processed and how it should look like. And from there on, it decided to rebuild the whole thing by deleting the old one, because all of the diagrams and all of these things are technically hosted on your computer, and to rebuild it from scratch. Now we're waiting for it to complete the specific visualization. And while that's happening, Gemini actually decided to complete its own thing. But as you can see, the diagram just decided to stop working because there's a syntax error. So we can say that and fix it. So the reason I'm actually showing you this, and the reason I didn't come up with prepared diagrams and prepared chats and started to explain what's happening, is because I wanted to simulate an actual situation of it not working and us actually reviewing this. Because as much as I'd want to tell you that AI is a silver bullet, it really isn't. The diagramming itself often breaks, especially because models are technically based on tokens. They're based on creating specific text, and diagramming is still a greenfield for them. They're still trying to make it. That's why we have things like this coming up. Now, let's see what Claude decided to come up with. Now, as you can see, the process by itself is a bit improved from the one that we had previously. It does use the specific notations you would have from a sequence diagram, but it's not quite there yet. It's not something that you would really use. It's not something that you would show to a client. It's not something that you would actually show to your team because it doesn't look good. At this point, it's even closer to just developer documentation than actually a diagram and process you would show to your stakeholders. And at this point, if I have to be honest with you, I would start a new chat and define the process simpler, or I would just start diagramming the process by myself, just because I spent enough time on this to the point where I was disappointed with the model itself. But if I had access to Gemini, I could, for example, see that it managed to come up with a relatively okay sequence diagram to the point where I would like to actually start working on it now. So what I'd wanted to do is I will ask it to extract the sequence diagram from the canvas. Now, while it does that, sometimes the file also breaks, which is also one of the things what I also don't like about Gemini. At this point, I might want to drop this session, create a new chat, and just tell to Claude, here is the exact process. Now, in this case, I gave the Gemini code to Claude and requested for it to just identify the sequence diagramming piece of it, because if you remember, apart from the sequence diagram, it also had a requirements piece to it. And I wanted to extract it into a draw.io file so I can actually continue working on it from here on out manually, because I think that either the AI is not going to make it better, or I just want to add a few tweaks here and there and just proceed with sending it out to my team for review or to stakeholders after I think that I'm relatively done. And for some processes, it might be easier for me to just model them in 5 minutes using Draw.io or Visio. But for some processes like this, when I'm stuck, I might want to use AI for inspiration or to use it as a starting point from which I can actually start adding information on. Now, let's see if Gemini managed to output an actual file. It gave out the sequence diagram in here. And while it does that, I'll try to open Draw.io on the side. You won't be able to see it yet. And I'll try to insert it. And if it works, I'm going to share my screen and let you know about it. Okay, funny enough, this time around it actually worked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the showing, reshare to Draw.io. And as you can see, the diagram by itself is already up. The diagram that we did with AI is already up. And there are some things that, for example, I wouldn't normally present to developers. I wouldn't normally do because I don't consider them for myself a good practice, such as Microsoft Entra ID is just an authentication service. It's it's not something major. It's not really an actual thing that you would normally mention in your sequence diagram, because you want it to be understandable not to developers only, but also to the quality engineers that will be reviewing it. And some of them just want to see it's an authentication service because they don't need to have all of the context to do their job. So at this point, I might start shifting and adding information here and there and adding new boxes, adding new layers, and so on. But this at hindsight is a relatively good starting point, which I would normally not get if I was not using AI. I could have done some pieces of it, but I might have missed out on this. So this is a good starting point when you're trying to do visualizations with AI. And just for the sake of it, I'm going to also create a new type of ad hoc visualization with you right here. And the way that it's going to work is I want someone from here that's currently listening to provide me some form of requirement they would like to be visualized. And if you have a specific type of diagram you want it visualized in, that would also be great. Is there any process, any type of thing you want visualized that we could actually test out in here and even have a somewhat discussion about it so we can make it more? useful to you as a hands-on experience and not just a stage demo, as some may think this is. Kirilo, do you have any specific process you would like us to model, for example?
Yeah, I was just typing it.
Oh,
For example, we can do requesting a loan in the bank. How about that?
okay. So let's try that. Now, in this case, this is just very ad hoc, and I put in some words just so I don't have to think and define the process better. But at this point, it's good for you to, for example, select canvas.
Hey, are you
Just
sharing,
because,
Georgi?
oh,
Okay.
apologies. Of course, I forgot about that. So not only did I forget about, not only did I forget to change the date, but I also forgot to share my screen. Perfect. So I did exactly what you suggested, requesting a loan from a bank, and I asked it to use Gemini Canvas because sometimes the model decides to not use it properly. Now, this is a classic example of where it actually started to write the text, which, to be fair, is a mistake on my side. And this is what I meant by actually having to rewrite the prompt because you forgot to add a specific detail to it. At this point, you would want to stop the whole document being created with Canvas, and you would mention something along the lines of, so at this point, we are trying to guide the model to use a specific format rather than using direct text. We wanted to model it in a visual way and to render it within the system itself. And while it does that, I want to actually provide you with an example of how ChatGPT would do the absolute same thing. And why in most cases, I don't really enjoy the process of working with it, even though it's a very advertised service as a whole, just because it became the benchmark for these types of services. Nope, it decided to fail, of course. So at this point, before actually quitting, what we would what we could do is say the following. Now, as I said, most of AI actually breaks quite often, and we can actually see it in practice. That's why we can add follow-up prompts to fix it. And as you can see, ChatGPT actually decided not to properly render this, but rather to create the mermaid format that you can actually paste inside of a tool like Draw.io instead. Or you could get Gemini to fail this again. Now, at this point, if I have a license to it. Now, to do that, I'll copy this. I'll use Bot Canvas. And make it React based. So as you can see, ChatGPT did fail us on this. Gemini decided to actually have a syntax error in text, and we can ask it to fix it while Claude is trying to get something up. And while this is being generated, let's make more use of the time that we have in here. I see that there is also a request for a process of calculating commissions on sales for multiple business lines. Let's try to do exactly that. And at this point, I can also run subsequent uses of, for example, Gemini or Claude in order to visualize this process. So let's try that.
I like, by the way, that you're like showing the real thing and how it constantly fails, because like management has already like o over expectation about what AI can do,
Exactly.
and also all this LinkedIn posts and some sort of articles which are generated every day about how great the next model is or whatever. So it creates a false feeling about how it actually works. So it's great that we can see how the trial and error actually actually happens in real life.
Yeah. And as you can see, it actually managed to come up with something. And I think it's relatively good as a starting point. What do you think?
Not really, to be honest, because the swim lanes, this is the problem with all this process diagrams, and
Mm,
I try to do the same thing when and I was like experimenting. It never does a clear like swim lane, let's say structure, but it rather
hmm
like maps it all over the place.
Yeah, for sure. But it does give you some information on how the process might look like. So you could potentially get that information and actually create the swim lane yourself, as an example. And let's see what Claude came up with. Maybe it's a bit less broken. Well, it did end up being a swim lane, but the arrows are all over the place, as you can see. Oh, and one thing that you might want to consider, and that this actually happens to me often, is if I want a model to actually look good, I can take a screenshot of this, put it into Gemini, and ask it to. So this is an example of when we're going to use a specific item, such as using a specific image in order to have a baseline for the model to work with it. Because at some points it gets confused about how it should align the layout. As you can see in here, the process flow diagram, it decided to make it all over the place and to make it a bit hard to read and not follow a specific standard. But if it has a reference image to it, it sometimes makes it a bit better. For example, right here, again, I wouldn't consider this a swim lane, but it's still a bit better from what it was previously.
It is a bit better, I agree. And so you just showed it a picture of how it should
Yes,
look like? Oh,
yes.
nice, nice.
So you can also use reference images as a form
Cool.
of context.
Okay. Can GPT also do that, or is just a trick for Gemini?
You can use it for Claude. For GPT, sometimes it creates artifacts like this. And let's see if we wanted to. So sometimes I actually ask it to create it as a specific artifact, because the way models actually do the diagrams is they containerize absolutely everything. And as you can see, it decided now to use it as a React component in order to actually visualize the process. Before, it actually made it just as a text because it would take far less tokens to actually produce this thing. Oh, by the way, we had a process of calculating commissions on sale for multiple business lines. So it decided to create a mini application with $10,000, and the business line is SaaS. And what happens when the quota is exceeded? Let's see what it does. It actually provides you the calculations of it as well. It's not a diagram, but it also provides you the visualization piece to it, where you can select what kind of business line you're using and what kind of rate you would normally charge for it with all the calculations. Now, all of this can be made more advanced if you spend more hours to it, if you have specific templates, or if you've thought about it a bit more than just a couple minutes. And let's see finally what ChatGPT came up with. Any moment now. Sometimes the visualizations from ChatGPT break. That's why I usually don't use it. And it doesn't really help me out as much as Claude does, even though right now it did fail quite a bit. But this is the risk of live demos, um, as it normally happens. So while it's actually loading all this, we can also add additional processes to this, but this is not the point of the presentation. So while we wait for, actually, I'm just going to reset the page and try to open it. While we're doing that, do we have any questions? Because I have just a bit I also want to talk to you about, and then we would be close to actually finalizing the session. Are there any questions from anyone on the bridge?
There is one about does SoftServe pay for all of the tools you have used? I may take this one if you want.
No, no. I have many tools I actually use, but some of them I pay for myself just because I like to experiment with as many AI tools as I can, just to understand if I want to deprecate one of them. And in essence, I had this running joke even for the past year or two, where I spent quite a bit monthly for AI tools. For example, I also do some vibe coding on the side. And it decided to break the syntax. Sometimes it does proper visualizations, but most of the times it actually provides a failed mermaid version instead. So here we are. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And that's why I have a specific lesson for you. And I'm going to skip one of the slides just so I can share my screen with you and present what I had in mind in the first place, which is this. And I hope that this time I actually shared it, is how I view the process for traditional versus AI assisted diagramming. And the thing is, traditional diagramming actually encourages you to actually understand the requirements deeply and to pick the appropriate diagram based on your experience and based on the context that you've been working and based on the stakeholders that you're working with. From there on, it also provides you with greater control over actually following standards based on your experience, manually refining it. But the biggest cons are it takes a lot of time, and sometimes you might overlook useful diagramming types just because you don't feel confident in them. And one of the common pitfalls is that when diagramming traditionally, it's mostly limited by the individual experience and awareness of available diagramming types. Now, the thing is, when I was studying for CCBA back a couple years ago, I didn't know some of the diagrams within Babok. Okay, some is an understatement, a lot of them. And the thing is, while reading Babok and preparing for the exam, I got a sense of how I would have visualized some processes I normally did in terms of either other visualizations or via text-based user stories, epics, and use case written in a textual-based format. So it is really limited to your awareness of available diagramming types. And as for AI-assisted diagramming, it helps you explore different types of visual models. It does help you to experiment a lot with things that you're mostly unfamiliar or unconventional in a sense of visualizing a process, which can really prompt some inspiration on your side. But the diagrams can omit key details. And the thing is, um, I've created diagrams which looked good on paper, but they omitted some of the details on the requirements I had in mind. They lack consistency in the formatting of the entire thing, and sometimes required manual rework from my side in order to make it as a workable diagram. And of course, it can misinterpret requirements, overgeneralize them, or create loosely loosely connected visual elements like the ones that we saw where the arrows were all over the place, or even it could break to the point where it doesn't actually show a diagram, even if you requested one. So this is as a summary. That being the case, there is a Q&A section that was throughout the session, but this is the dedicated piece to it.
I think we
What
have
about
one, yeah. What about handling NDA? Yeah.
what about handling NDA questions when sharing project data with AI? So I think that really depends from company to company. The specific client I work with is more so a partner to SoftServe, and I'll not provide the name. But the idea there is that I would use their own tooling in order to produce diagrams, in order to provide actually any kind of information to use AI generated content, because their personal preference is that no information goes out of their systems. Um, as well as if I'm trying to do it for internal processes that are not related to my client and to my partner, in that case, I would still go through specific standards that SoftServe does have about what kind of information you can input and what kind of things you can produce and what you cannot do. Um, Actually, in the initial slide that I had the policies listed out, but since this is not a specific SoftServe event, uh, those were taken out. Will the recording be available? Would be great to watch. I think yes, because I can see that it's being recorded. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I already like followed up on this question. That is the recording will be available. Moreover, we're broadcasting that on YouTube, so it will be saved and you can watch it on YouTube as well. So, the best of both worlds.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? I can see the ones in Zoom. Are there any in YouTube or somewhere else? Or does anyone have any other questions?
I don't see, but I may. Yeah, there is one on
What
Cursor.
is your thought about cursor? Uh, this is not exactly related to this presentation, but in general, I would say it's a good tool for AI assisted development. So if you're a developer and you want to actually use it, you want to actually build something, it's great. If you want to vibe code something with it, I would say it's not the best thing, just because you're exposing a system to security vulnerabilities, to specific things that you may not know as intimately as a developer would. And if you're looking for purely business analysis or product management related tasks, I would more so suggest something like Claude Code because it executes on a similar version and it's more so CLI based. It's kind of hard to get used to initially because it doesn't have a fancy UI, it doesn't have switches, but it does provide you with good overall bits on how to use AI for your work. Hopefully that answers your question, but in general, I don't use Cursor a lot. I tried it a couple of times, but it's not my thing. I personally use Claude Code as an alternative. Um, suggest you tries a lot of building diagrams with AI. Does it really save time? How many percent? So to quantify it, I cannot provide you with a direct answer because I have not tracked it. It does save me time usually in modeling the initial experience because unlike in this session, I usually come up with requirements I've already gathered and information I've already prepared beforehand, which has taken me a lot of time to get. I input it and think a bit about what kind of prompt and how to structure it and then place it. Usually the diagrams come up okay. If they don't, I model them by myself. But in general, I would say that it has saved me some time. And if I were to put a ballpark estimate to it, I would say it's about 15 to 20% faster than if I were doing it completely manually. Um, I also pay for one of the tools myself. I'm not sure if there's a question in here, so I'm not sure how to answer that.
I guess it's just a comment on how to
Yeah,
avoid what's the proper word? Uh,
exfiltration of
yeah,
information, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah, correct, correct.
Okay. So one more thing. Um, Here are the references to the visual modeling slide, and I'll also tie in some resources I would like to share with everyone that's attended this session, that's registered for it, just so you get some information on how to start doing diagrams with AI for yourselves. And I would like to give like 1 or 2 more minutes if anyone has any last questions. If not, I suppose we can close it, or maybe I could give the word to Kirilo if he has any parting words. Okay. Is there anyone know how to generate a BPMN diagram with AI that will be editable? Well, generally, in the occasions where Claude, Gemini, or ChatGPT generate a BPMN diagram that works, you can export it into Mermaids, into XML, or another format and insert it into the most popular tools such as Visio, such as Draw.io, and then edit it manually. I do believe there are some tools on the market that can produce diagrams quite well and they look good to the point where you can extract and really place them in, and the work is less than if you were just using an AI interface. But the thing is, the tools that I know of, and the reason I'm not mentioning them is they usually don't have enterprise licenses, and sharing data with them is not the best thing. I personally have some models I run locally on my laptop that where the data is not really doesn't exit my machine. But there are tools. I would normally specify them, but in the context of actual project client related work, I would not suggest anything else apart from an enterprise license tool.
Yeah, good point. I like the one that I tested, and again, like a good point about not having an enterprise license was PA Copilot, I think it was called, the diagramming tool. It actually created good BPMN diagrams. I think that was the only tool which actually created BPMN diagrams with a proper notation. But still, like there's like too many tweaks that you need to do. It just gives you a very basic flow. However, it gives you several options. You know how it can work. Like option one, option two, option three. You may choose and then still work with it. And like from my experience, like creating diagrams and models with AI is one of the most complicated use cases so far. So like let's say mockups or uh, prototypes, much better. Yeah, yeah, it does much better job with that.
For sure. Prototyping applications or just functionality, it's wonderful. It does a great job, but visualizing processes, it still has a long way to go. And even right now, sometimes the diagramming looks good, sometimes it fails miserably, as as we saw in here.
Mhm.
And maybe if we restarted the process a couple more times or gave it more details, it might have worked. But here it is, the actual reality of what it looks like to do diagramming live without being prepared to demo something.
Yes, exactly. All right. I think we don't have more questions. So thank you so much, Georgi, for doing that. And actually, very nice and great move on demoing actual thing. This is what I really like, that it's not like prepared. This is what I usually like to do. I like it to go smooth. And I prepare everything beforehand and just show the results. So it looks very smooth. But in reality, yeah, you're right. It fails and fails a lot, and you have to be prepared for that. So yeah, thank you so much for the session. I see we have a lot of thanks in the chat, so I guess people loved it as much as I did. So all right, thank you for joining us, Georgi. Again, thank you for doing the session, and see you next year. Have all of you have a great Christmas and great New Year celebration, and see you next year in the next Beacon session.